derived from antiquated and oppressive principles of customary international law as ruthlessly practiced in the primitive colonial era. As we have seen, these practices generate sharp political, economic, and military opposition, not only from the intended victims, but also from all other states which share a common history. Even the most cursory review of United States foreign policy in Africa and elsewhere marks and makes clear that our national interests require that foreign policy be firmly rooted in and be restricted by international law. Our conduct in Somalia, using the need for food as a political inducement and justification for political intervention, was, in the words of Ramsey Clark, a former US Attorney General, a tragic mistake. We sat back while they starved by the tens of thousands. We think we can feed more people with guns, end of quote. Somalia is not the only example of starvation diplomacy. In Liberia and Haiti, we are deliberately starving the population by blockade. In Iraq, thousands died from hunger and lack of medicine due to US sanctions. We could have lifted 10 times the amount of food to Somalia at half the cost of the military expedition needed to assert the US presence and the hegemony in the region. Vietnam, like Somalia, was a pawn to meet our interests, a pawn to the West, and like Somalia is worse off because of military efforts to force them to establish a government that is subservient to our interests. The future of world peace and the human and political economic rights of the have-nots, the nations of Africa, and of other southern hemispheres of the globe depend upon the US and the United Nations itself, abandoning the relics of the colonial and Cold War past. Reliance on the principles of international law embodied in the UN Charter and the declarations which implement these principles must be applied before we let patriotic fervor again allow the administration to send US troops rather than humanitarian aid to another country, seeking to free itself from its colonial past. Each of us must take the responsibility for making sure that this government, the United States of America, does not continue its foreign policies and practices that violate domestic and international law. Each and every one of us must demand an end to arrogant incursions into the third world, using the flag, military music, jets flying overhead to muffle the cries of the people of nations weakened by past oppression that we seek to save against their will. Thank you very much. I am told that we are supposed to leave here in 1 o'clock. You have 1 minute.
We will have time for questions, but anybody who does have to leave at 1 o'clock for class or anything, this is the opportunity for you to politely leave. The rest of you who want to stay, we will have time for probably 10 or 15 minutes of questions. So start thinking of your question. Who'd like to be the first questioner?
Yes, sir.
Do you think that our intervention in Somalia is connected with oil policy? I read an article in the paper that said that the oil companies in this country have drilling rights in Somalia, and speculation that there may be oil fields there similar to the ones that are across the strait.
Well, I do not have any information with that degree of specificity that there are potential oil fields that the United States is coveting. But it is clear to me that while the Cold War has ended, the United States views the access to the Gulf as critical and views that area of the mouth to the Red Sea and access to the Indian Ocean as critical. And so we want control of that area. We want the ability to have forward troops and supplies to be stationed there. And that is one of the reasons why the Pentagon wanted the military presence. The airlift of food could have been handled in a different way. And I think that what has happened in Somalia is that we came out of Vietnam not wanting to, in fact, shed American blood. And for 20 years or so, no administration was prepared to project U.S. troops. We took a calculated risk in Grenada, a country having a population of under 100,000 people. So we sent the Marines in, and we came out waving our fingers in the air. Number one, very low risk, high returns. We moved in Panama. And of course, we took on Saddam. And at this point, we feel that the use of gunboat diplomacy is our way of establishing the New World Order, which is the order of the United States. The specific question about oil in Somalia, I cannot address that question, but certainly there are geostrategic issues at play. Yes, sir.
Me?
Yes, in the white shirt.
Thank you. There are two books. One is called The Brave and the Blessed, written by the former American ambassador to Kenya, by the name William Arthur. And there is another book by the name U.S. Foreign Policy, Revolution and the Tanzania, by Wilson Ambrisi. According to this book, the Cold War in East Africa was equated with Islamism.
Was what?
Cold War.
Yes.
Islam was equated with communism in the East Coast.
Islam was equated
Yeah.
with communism, yes. Sure.
But now Islam is still there. Are you telling me that the new world order now is against Islam?
The New World Order is against any force or forces that is perceived or viewed as challenging U.S. economic and political interests. If Islam, and not just Islam, what is now being described as Islamic fundamentalism, that is how it's being described now, not just Islam. That is now the new code word for a force that threatens the hegemony as we see it. Within the context of the United States, right here, in the land of the free, the home of the brave and the Yankees, we are not talking about communism as a threat. What are we talking about? Terrorism, international terrorism. And who are the terrorists? The terrorists are those individuals whom we believe are plotting to destabilize and overthrow the government of the United States, who, and in this case, there's a whole question of some trials in New York involving Islamic fundamentalism emerging out of Egypt that have targeted United States interests. And so to answer your question, yes, today it is viewed as Islamic fundamentalism. And there are forces, the United States is aligning with forces in the Arab world to attempt to maintain the same hegemony. Saudi Arabia, Kuwait, these are political entities created, supported by the United States to advance its own interests. Yes, sir. In the back, in the sweater, gray and black. Right.
You said the U.S.'s geopolitical interests have been
Yes.
the prime mover of whether a country would be assisted.
Correct.
I'm looking at Liberia
Liberia.
in Africa.
Okay. West Africa.
I think that all the countries in Africa put together, where Liberia stands out as what should stand as the primary interest of the U.S. But when Doe unleashed his reign of terror on Liberia, the U.S. did not go in there. And I realized that the Goodyear tire industry are probably the largest consumer of
Absolutely.
in Liberia.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so I do not know, I cannot really balance that. The interest of the U.S. definitely was at stake in Liberia, but no Marine was sent there. It was left to the OAU and to ECOWAS to solve.
Okay, you're dealing with several factors. Absolutely, Goodyear has a large economic interest in terms of its plantations and so on there. But Liberia, you know the history of Liberia, how Liberia was created. Talbot preceded Doe. Doe, there was no problem with Doe. Doe was viewed as a clown. He provided no threat to U.S. interests. And so therefore, if you could control a clown, you don't move in. Now when Doe was toppled, the question was, can we protect our interests, and who are the forces at play? The CIA supports the government in power, and they support whom? The dissidents. They support both sides. I represented as a lawyer, criminal trial lawyer, I represented individuals who were attempting to topple Baby Doc. These were individuals who were Haitians, who were organizing and trying to buy weapons in the United States to train troops in the Everglades. Now, you know that the United States have been training gusanos in the Everglades to overthrow Castro. But in this case, my clients were arrested. They were charged with violating the Neutrality Act. These characters who were recruited and went to Angola, they were never charged, but they were charged. Once we began to get information, we began to realize that the CIA was supporting both sides, and even today, they're supporting the opposition because they're hedging their bets. Whoever gets into power, they want access to. And that is how they operate. And so you have Taylor in Liberia, and the question is, how is Taylor getting the kind of money he is getting, and who is really supplying him? There isn't, while there may be upheaval, who comes to power is not, the United States is not viewing that in terms of a threat to its interests. And so therefore, they are prepared, to have surrogates deal with that question, as opposed to projecting U.S. troops, which the Congress of the United States may have a problem with. Somewhat, yes, sir.
Do you think that the support of the U.S. of Mobutu, President Mobutu in Zaire, who is still oppressing these people and pushing them really to do over from Zaire,
Sure.
is linked to that support that the U.S. is still supporting Savimbi, I mean,
Sure.
and Angola,
Yes.
and who's killing badly these people?
Of course.
In Angola,
Yes.
you know, and that's Zaire 99.
Yes.
And these people, they haven't been in peace since. They're dying, and they're still dying today.
Yeah. There's you.
If there's anything going on to help people like in Zaire and Angola right now, you know, we come up with the national conference, and the vice president, the minister came out from the national conference. It doesn't have anything, we will still have everything that is there.
Okay. Let me suggest this to you. I think that we, after April 27 of next year, we might have a new dynamic. South Africa, with the aid, assistance, connivance, conspiracy of the United States government, destabilized all of the frontline states. Zaire was the base, the rare base used by the CIA to support all of that destabilization effort. Mobutu was viewed as someone very crucial to the United States' interest in Southern Africa, which was what? To deny the Soviet Union access to the minerals and access to the sea routes in that area. That was a geostrategic issue that was being proposed and argued at the national security level at the United States. Mandela is going to take power. The ANC is going to take power after April 27. The situation in Namibia is going to shift drastically. Namibia, for example, gained its independence in 1990 and yet does not have access to its only port, because Walvis Bay has been viewed as South African territory. That's going to shift and change. We're going to see a new approach coming out of South Africa, which would then enable the rest of Africa in the Southern Africa region to begin to develop from a regional basis. The people of Zaire have to take actions in their own, take steps in their own hands, and they ought to proceed to support Mobutu as a rope supports a hanging man. Now, every time I speak, I end up with another page in my FBI file. I'm not seeing anybody here would be responsible. But somehow, there's a page that says deleted, said Hines was at Iowa State University, and at a lecture, these are the comments that he made. The comments that I am making here, just for the record, so it's very clear, are I am not advocating, I am not urging anyone to take any actions. And so I am saying it appears to me that in the finest tradition, in the finest American tradition, those who are in fact being victims of tyranny should rise up, and support the tyrants in the only way they know how and understand, like a rope supports a hanging man. Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
If we were to have a remarkable change of policy towards Africa or anywhere in the Southern Hemisphere, given the unnatural boundaries in Africa that have been created by Europeans, given the armament that has gone on in the last 35 or 40 years, how do we proceed with a policy that would build infrastructure and governments without interfering or imposing our philosophies of government on these people?
It's a very difficult question, because we have created certain entities to as extensions of our foreign policy. That is the IMF, the World Bank, and so on. And they have a vision, which is preparing and making clones of Western development. And that is the reality. Countries are being held hostage if they decide on any alternative approach to development. Very, very difficult phenomenon that we're in. Very little options. Take, for example, South Africa. Take, for example, Namibia. In South Africa, there's a Freedom Charter. The ANC today are not talking about the Freedom Charter, which was built upon an alternative economic set of principles. Freedom Charter talks about a job for every South African who, in fact, wants a job. The ANC is dealing today with trying to encourage maximum private investment and approaching nearly a laissez-faire approach to encouraging foreign investment to come in. We within the anti-apartheid movement were talking, at least within the context of the United States, of having US corporations agree with certain principles and guidelines of how they would operate in South Africa. The ANC has said to us, please, we do not want you now to place burdens and restrictions on US corporations. We, a new government in South Africa, will lay those out. Because we are competing with whom? We are competing with Chile, we are competing with Brazil, we are competing with other countries for US investors. You don't put those restrictions on those people, and if in fact you put restrictions on us, then those private investors will go elsewhere. And so those are the real dynamics. We can, in the context of a classroom, begin to theorize in these areas. But when you deal with the practical reality, it is very difficult for emerging countries to choose a path of development while they're being weighted down with the legacies of colonialism and trying to propel their society forward and creating a better life without dealing with the hard economic realities. And it's a very difficult problem. You have SWAPO. SWAPO has taken power for 3 years. the material base, the infrastructure base, housing has not changed for Namibians. The hope for Namibians is not for them now, but for their children's children, in that there is a government that is being controlled by the people who are struggling to find a way to move forward. It's a very difficult situation. All right, thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Hines, and I want to thank everybody who attended and remind you of our lecture tonight by Randall Robinson at 8 o'clock in the sunroom. Pick up a brochure on the way out if you haven't had one. Thank you very much.